Welcome everybody. This is Eddie, the technical instructor in photography, coming to do another demo. Today we're going to be printing with Photoshop. So we have to start out with getting an image and moving it into Photoshop. So I've gone ahead and downloaded some images for myself. So I'm going to go to the Downloads folder. I'm going to open in Finder, and then if you hover over an image, click on it, and then hit the space bar, it'll bring up a preview. And if you use your arrows, you can cycle through and look at which one you want to use. So I'm going to go ahead and use this one. So I'm going to space bar again, and then I'm going to right click, open with Photoshop, or you can also click, drag, and then just drag to Photoshop and it'll open it. Once you do either one, you will see the Photoshop icon bouncing, and then you'll bring up the little waiting menu, and it's going to take a little bit to open. You may or may not have to log in depending on what if the person who left their Adobe login logged in, then we can use it, or you can go ahead and sign out if you want. I'm just going to go ahead and use this one that was already signed in. So here we are in Photoshop. So one of the first things that we want to do when we get into Photoshop is that we want to make sure that we change our profile. So down here it's going to say untagged gray, and we want it to say Adobe RGB 1998. So to do that, we go to Edit, we go to Convert to Profile, and then so here's our source space, right? Right now at the bottom left it says untagged gray. That's also gray gamma 2.2. But we want our destination space to be Adobe 1998. So we're going to hit OK. And now you'll see at the bottom left, it's going to say Adobe 1998. At some point in your life, you might run into an issue where the little menu down here might be clicked on document size, or it might be on document dimensions. So you just have to hit this little arrow and it'll pop out this little menu, and then that way you can choose which one you want to use. So now that we've done that, our next big thing is to make sure that we're sizing our image correctly. So I went ahead and made some adjustment layers and did some editing of some things, but nothing too crazy. Since we're just sticking to printing, I'm just going to try and keep it simple. Your adjustment layers are here, your tools are over here, so do with those what you will. But right now, what I want to do is just, I think I'm going to crop this a little bit, and then I'm going to size it. So first, I'm going to go ahead and crop it. So your crop tool's right here. You can also hit C on the keyboard. And all right, so we've got our image and it's cropped. So next thing I'm going to do is check the size of the image. So image and image size, or Command Option I on the keyboard, we can go in and see how big our image is. So when we're printing, we want to keep our resolution at 300. If you scanned an image and it's at 1000, and then you try and print that at 1000 resolution in this, it's going to freak out the printer, it's going to freak out the computer, and it might not print anything at all. So you just have to make sure you're setting your resolution to 300. 300 is the easiest for the printer to be able to receive and print. Anything larger than that, it's going to take a long time to transmit that information to the printer, and then it's going to take longer for you to print. So it's just easiest to leave it at 300. So what we did right now, was we went to image, and we're going to uncheck resample, and then we're going to change our resolution to 300 and check resample again. That way it locks our resolution at 300, and then we can bring these sizes down. So I'm printing on 8.5 by 11 paper today. So this image is a little long. So if I change this to 8.5, it's going to be at 11.5 on the other edge. So that's already too long. With all papers in general, when you're using printers, is you want to make sure you leave 1/8 of an inch margin on each side of the paper. That way you can make sure you're staying within the limitations of the printer and the paper. So the printers don't usually print edge to edge. If they do, then it usually means that your image has been stretched a little bit. So What we want to do is make sure that this fits within our 8.5 by 11 size paper. If we want to leave an 1/8 inch margin on each side, then our paper technically is 8 1/4 by 10 3/4. So if we go and change this side to 10 3/4, then the other side falls way within our limitations, and this one we get 1/8 of an inch on each side. So we're pretty good there. I think that's the perfect size to go, and then that way that will allow us to have a good size for printing. So and like I said, we're going to be using 8.5 by 11 size paper, so I'm gonna go ahead and print now. So there's a few things before we print in terms of the dialog boxes, but all of our adjustments are done, all of our layers are organized, so we can see what we've done here. So then now we go to Command P or File Print, we will pull up this window. So today I'm going to be printing on BERT, right? So BERT is one of our Epson P900s. The P900s and the P800s in the lab can print up to 17 inches on the short side, and the P700 can print up to 13 inches on the short side. So when you load the paper in the printer, it has to be loaded vertically. So if you want to go into Print Settings, and once we're in, we are going to make sure that our printer is selected. And we're going to choose a custom paper size. So I don't like to choose these ones because they will usually have a margin that is maybe too rigid and it doesn't usually help us. So because we made our own margins, right, we've given the paper room to breathe with that 1/8 inch margin on the long edge, then we can go ahead and just make our own. So this is what I recommend to everyone. So if we go to Manage Custom Sizes, and then we hit this little plus sign, we can change the name by double clicking on here. So I'm gonna go Eddie letter size print. All right, and then so right now our width is at 8.5 and our height is at 11, which is perfect. So next thing we have to do is just change these to 0. So if you hit 0 and then hit tab, 0 tab 0 tab 0 tab. We've made our margins for ourselves, so we don't need the computer telling the printer to create margins for us because we already did it ourselves. So we want to have as much control as you can. So we're going to go ahead and hit OK. And we'll see that in custom papers, our paper size is right there. So some people have gone ahead and made their own. Some people didn't name theirs, which is okay. So if you're using 13 by 19 paper, you can use that one, or 11 by 17 paper, you can use that one. But let's go ahead and move on. So next thing we want to do is go into printer options, and then we go into printer settings. The big thing about these printers is that you need to make sure your page setup is correctly chosen. So sheet borderless auto expand is going to stretch your image, so we don't want that. We're not using roll paper, we're not using thick paper, we're not using any of these poster boards. We're using sheet and just sheet, right? Need sheet on its own, not sheet borderless or sheet borderless expand, auto expand. We just want just sheet. And then our media type, I'm going to be using a Epson glossy paper today. So I'm going to go into photo, and then I'm going to go to premium photo paper glossy, select that. And then depending on which printer you're using, these might show up, but because we are using this printer, it's not going to let us choose anything. So print quality, we want it at standard. We always want it to be at 1440. And then we hit OK, and then we hit save. Now our paper size is set, and our paper selection is also set. So next, what we have to do is select our printer profile. So right now it's grayed out down here. So we need to change this from Printer Manages Color to Photoshop Manages Color. And then in our printer profile, we're going to go ahead and find the same one that we chose before, so the Premium Photo Paper Glossy. And then we'll see that our paper kind of changed colors a little bit. So it's giving us a preview here, and once we go to Match Print Colors, we will be able to see kind of rendering of what it's going to look like. So it kind of dulls it down a little bit. If you don't check show paper white, it'll bring the highlights up, but we want it to simulate as best as we can. So we're going to go ahead and go there. And then our rendering intent, we're going to change to perceptual. Right. I've found that perceptual works the best. It usually does a better job of representing the shadows and the highlights and the midtones in your image. If you want to, so if we scroll down, we can see, right, our image size is here. So we've got 10.75 inches on the long edge and then 7.909 on the short edge. So we're well within our limits and we're centered, and we don't really have to click anything else here. So as long as all of this stuff is okay and your paper size is correct, then we are good. So before I hit print, I'm gonna go and load my sheet of paper into the printer. So like I mentioned before, we're going to be using a glossy paper from Epson, and we're going to be printing on BERT. All right, so we've got a few things we've got to do before we click print. So I'm pulling my piece of paper out of my little container. So I've got my glossy paper. You can see it's glossy. Please only use photo paper when you're printing in this computer, when you're using these printers. All right, so we're going to load our paper into there. And as soon as we load it in, that little screen's gonna light up and we're gonna be able to see what our screen is saying to us. So we wanna make sure that we're selecting the right paper. So like we did on the computer, we're gonna click on plain because it's not plain paper. And we're gonna scroll here and we're gonna see where our paper's at. If for some reason our paper isn't listed here, we can go to more paper types, and we went to photo paper on the computer. So that's what we're gonna do. Click on photo paper and we're gonna go and select our premium glossy. All right, then we can hit OK and we're ready to go and hit print on the computer. So there's our paper, there's our printer using BERT, and our printer is already set and ready to go. All right, so now that we've made sure that we've selected all of our printing settings and we've loaded our paper, then we can go ahead and click print. So we can see that our printer is receiving data, right? And we get a little error message. We'll usually get this error message if the ink is low, but it's not out of ink. So what we want to do is hit proceed and then continue printing, and then we'll let it do its thing, and we will be able to see that the printer is printing. What's cool about these newer printers, this one, BERT, Ernie, and Cookie Monster, is that when they start printing, they will have a little light and it'll show you what it's printing at the moment. So pretty cool. And there it goes and starts printing. On the printer itself, you'll be able to see an estimation of how long your print is going to take. Depending on which settings you choose in your printing dialog box in Photoshop, it may be longer. Make sure you have enough time to do this printing. Don't come in here in a rush and assume it's going to be done super quick. So here's our print. Before you complain that it's too dark, just remember that in the digital lab, there's only lights on the sides of the room. So you can go in and see how it matches your print on your screen, your file. But what you can do is you can go around and put your image up on the little board over here. There's your little light timer. So we're going to put this up and we're going to turn the timer on, and then we can see that our image is there, and I think it looks pretty good. So our adjustments turned out well, our printing turned out well, and it fits within the limits of the paper. So once you've printed your image, you want to make sure that you save your image somewhere safe. I think best practice is to save your edited image as a PSD. So we're going to go ahead and go to File, Save As. Don't hit Save. We're going to save as. We're going to save in a safe location. So I'm going to save it on the desktop, and I'm going to move this to my hard drive later. But I'm going to call it 2024-09-17 and prints. And we're going to save it as a Photoshop, which will save it as a .psd file. So this makes it easier to kind of work with Photoshop. It doesn't compress any information, doesn't compress your layers. If you were to save this as a JPEG, you would compress all of your work that you would have done today, and all of your adjustments would be gone. So we want to make sure that we're saving as a PSD. You can save as a TIFF, but Photoshop, saving as a Photoshop file is a fully lossless file saving method. So just save it as a PSD. All right, we're going to hit save. And then before you do anything else, you want to make sure that your file exists where you saved it. So it's on the desktop in my folder, and there it is. There's my file. All right, so make sure you're saving your files, naming them correctly, saving them in the right place, and that way you don't lose track of anything. But there we go. Happy printing.